The Constitutional Court will hand down judgment on an application to have President Jacob Zuma impeached. The matter was brought forward by the Economic Freedom Fighters, which is also seeking a declaratory order that the Speaker of Parliament failed to hold the President accountable over the Nkandla saga. Aldrin Sampear joins us now. Aldrin, thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Let's give us context. You've been following this case. What led to these opposition parties approaching the court?
Well, you remember that last year, was it last year when the Constitutional Court handed down judgment on the Nkandla saga? And it found that the President failed to uphold, defend and respect the Constitution by not following through on the remedial action of the Public Protector at the time. Remember that the Public Protector made a findings, and one of those findings including that there's a certain amount that the President needs to pay back, and that never happened. And the matter then went all the way to the Constitutional Court, where the Constitutional Court then found that the President failed to uphold, defend and protect the Constitution. But remember, in that case already, the Constitutional Court found that the Speaker of Parliament failed to hold the President accountable and failed in its oversight authority to hold the executive to account. And what the EFF and the UDM is arguing is that ever since there has been this finding of the President failing to defend and uphold the Constitution, there hasn't been any proceedings against the President in terms of trying to hold him liable for his conduct, as well as for this finding that has been made by the Constitutional Court.
So we've just heard the announcement now. Is it quite unusual for the Constitutional Court to hand out a judgment around this time of the year?
It is pretty unusual because we got a tip-off that the judgment is happening. The judgment is going to be handed down tomorrow. I just tried to get a hold now of the spokesperson of the Constitutional Court. Unfortunately, couldn't get a hold of him because, you know, the courts are closed during this period. The courts go into a recess period, and that's the period that they are in at the moment, even with the High Court as well. I understand that the High Courts are only open when it's in a really urgent matter that's being brought in front of them.
Mm-hmm. There has been complaints, specifically by members of the ANC, high-ranking members sometimes, that the courts are trying to usurp the three centres of power, and that there shouldn't be interference. Could we see the Constitutional Court perhaps issuing a directive that the President should be impeached?
I doubt that the Constitutional Court will issue the directive that the President should be impeached. If you remember, during the secret ballot application, that's the one that was brought by the UDM, where the UDM was also seeking a declaratory order as well as clarification in terms of the powers of the Speaker of Parliament, Baleka Mbete, to constitute and hold a motion of no confidence and have that voted on via a secret ballot. Remember that Baleka Mbete said she doesn't have the power. The court then found that, no, you do have the power. But something else that the opposition parties in the secret ballot case were also seeking is that they sought that the court should instruct Parliament to conduct the motion of no confidence via secret ballot. And the court went at length stressing the issue around the separation of powers. And I doubt this time around that the court will say you must have this impeachment proceedings against the President. The court will argue perhaps that there is a role that the executive should, rather that the legislature should play, because even if you remember in the Nkandla matter, the court spoke about the powers of the legislature and how the legislature represent us, the people, us South Africans, are represented by those in Parliament, and those in Parliament should ensure that every member of the executive is held accountable as well and brought to book when they're found to have transgressed the powers.
We'll see what happens tomorrow, Aldrin. I know the story is just breaking. Have you been able to get comment from any of the political parties involved? And also perhaps tell us what this means for the ANC and their former president.
We haven't been able to speak to political parties. I just saw that I got a call now while we're here on set from another political party, so I just want to see what they have to say about this matter. We haven't heard anything as yet from political parties, but certainly this has been a bad year for President Jacob Zuma in courts. It's been arguably the most terrible year that the President has ever had in the courts. Remember that the Supreme Court of Appeal also said that the President should face the charges that's in the indictment. And right now, at this point, you have the NPA that's looking through the President's submissions that he've made in arguing why he shouldn't face those charges. The same High Court as well. The High Court has made a finding and said that the president should be held personally liable over the state capture judgment that was handed down. The state capture judgment also indicates that that the powers of the public protector, that she does have the powers to instruct the president on how to conduct his executive power in the case of appointing a judge that will look into setting up a commission of inquiry. So certainly it has been a terrible year for the president in the court. So we'll have to wait and see how this one pans out. But certainly it will have an impact, as I always stress, an impact on brand ANC. Jacob Zuma might not be there as the president of the ANC, but he still remains the former president of the ANC, and he remains a deployee of the ANC to the highest office in the land. So certainly, if this court judgment comes out and found that Parliament has again failed to hold the president accountable, and there should be these proceedings, it will certainly be a dent on brand ANC.
Aldrin Sampear, you're going to be following that story, I'm assuming, and giving us updates from the Constitutional Court tomorrow. Of course, the SABC will continue bringing you updates on that story.